Welcome to the program. I'm Mark Imperial. This segment's being brought to you by booksgrowbusiness.com. It's the place where busy professionals get their books published and done to educate consumers, grow their businesses, and to leave a legacy. This is a series of spotlights on remarkable business intermediaries and brokers from across the country. Joining me on this segment is Patrick Collins with Sunbelt, and he's also the founder of calbizvalue.com. Patrick, welcome to the program.
Thank you. Glad to be here.
Patrick, tell us a little bit about your work and tell us specifically who are the types of folks that you specialize in helping?
Well, it is primarily, as most are familiar with, Sunbelt business brokers and advisors. And the core elements of what I do, I will help business owners and buyers value businesses in sort of a near-term look and determine their marketability. And then actually marketing for sale. And then the other element of that is if they're not at the value they want to be, I also provide advisory services to help them build to an exit value that is what they're looking for.
So these business owners, they're really great at starting businesses, and growth is on their mind every day. But what about selling a business? How experienced are they? Do they even know where to start?
An awful lot of times they don't. They've worked really hard, and again, sort of a demographic in the industry right now with baby boomers. There's lots of them that have run and built great businesses over 30 or 35 years. So they've never sold a business and they've never bought one. They started this one they're in. And out of that, you kind of get to the end and look up and they look at retirement and they really didn't build the business to exit. So that's an element of their planning that, as you've referenced here, that isn't handled early enough in most cases.
Yeah. Speaking of early enough, how early should people start preparing their business when they're planning to sell?
I am literally, when I meet business owners today, and even if it's just out in the public square, as it were, and regardless of their age or how long they've owned their business, I tell them they should be planning everything they do based on an exit, whether it's 5, 10, or 25 years. But if you have a couple, 3 years to kind of pull yourself together and really be ready to go to market, that's the best. And other things along the way help you be prepared. The good books, the good clean books and things like that a lot of people are aware of, but not with an eye towards a possible exit. So I tell them start early and look at it often that way.
So we're coming out of a pandemic, and what's on a lot of people's minds? I mean, the pandemic's triggered a lot of folks to say, hey, I think it's time. We need to sell. But they want to know, is it really a good time to sell a business? Is it a good time to buy a business? What's the market been like for you?
Well, I think that the main thing there is, and we saw it. I mean, obviously, restaurants were hugely impacted. So that kind of extreme example. On the other hand, a lot of businesses deemed essential actually did better during COVID. They had a different set of demand. And the other element there is, boy, if I was a plastic manufacturer of some sort, and I pivoted to those screens that we all faced over the next 2 years, I made an absolute killing. So there's a variety of responses through that COVID period. But the overriding one, I think, for a lot of people was, okay, we get one of these events about every 10 years, and I don't want to go through the next one. So how do I prepare myself over the next few years to get sold before that next big event?
So I've seen a statistic recently that, more than 50%, maybe as much as 80% of businesses that go to market end up not selling. And I'd imagine a lot of folks are trying to sell them on their own. Maybe they're ill prepared. Can you kind of give us some insight on what are the key breakdowns and why a business may not sell?
I think number one, number two, and number three, the first three are all about pricing and what you think your business is worth and what the market will bear can be relatively far apart. And a key component of that is how financeable it is. So notwithstanding, I mean, outside of COVID, before, after, during, whatever, and we can talk about COVID a little bit more, but the point is that having a realistic market value that the market will bear, not what I want or what I need. Those are two different things from what the market will bear. And we use a most probable selling price model. So it's not an appraisal, but it is what we think the market will bear. So it's based on market comparables in sales and revenues and all those types of things. So it gives a business owner a realistic today value. And they may not agree with it, which is fine, but then it's probably not ready to go to market until there's a realistic price.
Speaking of the pandemic, you inspired a question of mine. I'm really curious. I mean, with every disaster, there's always an opportunity somewhere. And you mentioned how restaurants have been impacted. However, do people see that as an opportunity? Because I do see new restaurants still popping up, new brands popping up. Is there an opportunity there because that restaurant niche has been impacted so much?
I absolutely, there are, and not just restaurants, but to speak to that for a moment, I mean, there definitely is an opportunity. But if I'm going to try to build on a brand that was there before COVID, it's really important for me to understand, was it just COVID that hurt that brand? What did their sales look like for 2 or 3 or 4 years running into COVID? There were also a lot of businesses that went out that were on their way out anyway, but COVID sort of pushed the business over the edge real quick, and they weren't able to adjust or pivot, or didn't have the financial wherewithal to sort of push through with, in the restaurant case, just delivery or curbside service. So there's a variety of things, but there are certainly opportunities, and in a lot of cases, it might just be starting up and over and not trying to rebuild the brand that got killed in the or that was hurt in COVID.
And during this period, I understand that it's a good time to sell because of the fact that you've got like easier funding. Is that right? Could you talk about the bright side of being able to sell a business today and having people get approved?
I think there's well, one of the items to back up on that funding. A lot of business owners, as people are familiar, got the PPP loans, and there are also a lot of businesses that got the idle loans. And depending on how those were handled, that sort of puts another pause on my exit, my refi, and all those kinds of things. But for most owners, the PPP loans, you work through that and they get forgiven. So that helped me through that period. But the SBA on their general loans, yeah, once that whole getting those things funded, forgiven was behind them, you do have an SBA that's ready to jump back into that market. So I can go as a business owner, and business broker, I can go to the SBA and let them have a look at a business and have the business pre-approved subject to the buyer. And that makes it much more liquid as well, or saleable. But the opportunity is still looking kind of, what did it look like before, and where am I going to take it after, is still very important, and fundamentals are still important. What's my location? Is it if it's a lousy location before COVID and I got a big fat PPP loan, well, that doesn't improve my location today.
Patrick, what inspired you to become a broker? Like, how did you get into the field and how did you get started?
Well, I mean, it's sort of interesting. I've kind of been doing this all of my professional life, but not on a platform like this. So I spent 20 years in commercial real estate. There's real estate involved all the time in doing this. I was involved in economic development field for a while, which all meant working with businesses that were looking to relocate, which involves all those other logistics. And so along the way, in between various roles, I also did consulting work that was usually based on helping someone get their business on track. I wasn't looking at it 20 years ago. I wasn't looking at helping them do that to get it sold per se, but in effect, that's what I was doing. So I owned a business for 10 years. And when I sold that, the broker here called and said, "Hey, have you ever thought about doing this?" And as I worked through it, it's like, well, yeah, that is what I've been doing, just not with that particular hat on.
Patrick, before I ask you my last question, is there anything that I didn't think to ask you that you feel is important to share for business owners considering selling in today's economy?
Yeah, we touched on it a little bit, but I really kind of want to emphasize those fundamentals. And they have to be in place regardless of opportunity or lack of opportunity or up market, down market. So if we're looking at the history of a business and is it back or did COVID take me out? Was I flexible in there? Is the risk in the business higher or lower as I come out of COVID? So you'd still get back. What's going on in my industry? Is the industry trend? Did it fade away? The buggy whip is not the industry to be in anymore. And so what's happening inside my industry? That is probably one of the top things, is to understand what's going on with your industry and who's going to be interested in buying your business. If the headlines every day are about the industry failing, that's a tough sell. But again, there can be roll-ups and opportunities in that. But I think thinking about the fundamentals of your business was important before COVID, during COVID, and today.
For business owners listening who realize they need to get their stuff in order and would love your help, how can they find you, connect with you, and learn more?
A best way, absolutely out of the gate, it's a phone call. And my cell phone is 661-342-3436. And my direct email, so it's all confidential. It doesn't go into some big box and have a lot of people looking at it. And that's my cell phone number. So if they want to call, again, that's confidential, only picked up by me. And the direct email is patrick.collins@sunbeltnetwork.com.
Patrick, this has been terrific. I really appreciate you taking the time and sharing with my audience today. Great insights. I wish you continued success for you and for all of your clients.
Well, you too, and thanks for having me on. This is a great interaction for me as well.
That was Patrick Collins with the Sunbelt Network, and he's also the founder of calbizvalue.com. And this segment's been brought to you by booksgrowbusiness.com. It's the place where busy professionals get their books done and published to educate consumers, grow their practices, and to leave a legacy. That's all for now. I'm Mark Imperial, and thanks for joining me.